Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Command Point Podcast. My name's Ryan, and today I am here joined by your reigning 2024 Adepticon Kill Team Grand Tournament champion, Shane. Shane, how's it going?
Hey, it's going really well. I've got my medal here. If you're watching
Yeah,
on YouTube, I've got my I've
show
got
us the
my
trophy.
my golden ticket right here,
Nice.
and this thing that I had to get through TSA.
Yeah, that was a nightmare getting that through
Is
TSA.
pretty great, pretty cool stuff. Um, it's it's a good vibe. It's
Yeah,
a good time,
yeah,
and Chicago is great, and Adepticon is great.
yeah. And that's it. That's the episode, basically.
That's basically it. We're not going to do any
Yeah.
details. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah. No, but seriously, guys. Shane and I were both able to make top 8 at Adepticon at this tournament, so very cool. I'm super proud of myself, honestly, for making top 8. I've never top 8'd at a national level event before, so stoked to be doing that. And of course, I'm stoked that Shane won the whole thing. But let's go ahead and get into it and talk about, I guess we can talk about like our prep leading up to the tournament. We can talk about we'll go through like our games as best as we can recollect. Looking at like best post pairings and like the ITC track there. It's not updated yet to include these games, but we'll go over them as best we can from memory here. But yeah, very cool to see Shane take a team that was kind of poo-pooed by a lot of other people out there, not thought to be as strong as it turned out it was, I guess. And then I of course took the eternal, the not anymore, the no
Yeah,
longer
not anymore.
eternal veteran guard. But yeah, so Shane, let's get started here with talking about how we handled the prep for this tournament. So let's
Yeah.
start. I'll pass it off to you, and you can get us started here.
Yeah. So I took higher tech circle. And honestly it was very tumultuous the months I guess from January until Adepticon when I was trying to decide what I wanted to take, and you saw it because there must have been like 3 or 4 teams that I considered taking. I really wanted to rock higher tech for a long time just because I've been talking about the team for about a year almost. Not quite a year, like 8 months, I'd say, since last summer. And I definitely have gotten the impression that, like, it started, I think, when I was playing novitiates back in January, and I was trying to prep for my games, especially prepping for like Felgors and Commandos. And I remember thinking, like, how funny it was that in my mind, prepping, it felt like I kept thinking like, wow, this would be a lot easier if I was playing higher tech. Like I just had a better vibe for higher tech, which is kind of funny because Novitiates is a good team and higher tech was kind of like a mid tier. Um, but no, I mean the more I played it, and then I messed around with Hand of the Archon for a little bit, and that was
Mm-hmm.
just horrible. Um, and I thought about Felgor, but I just don't love that team very much. So, and honestly, what tipped it for me was I just have a lot of reps on higher tech circle playing them in the CPTS. I've been doing really well, and I feel like they are as close to like a counter meta pick right now that you can hope for. Um, and in addition to that, I really enjoy playing the team, so it was kind of an easy choice for me. But I feel like they're quite good into the melee hordes like Gellerpox and Chaos Cults, in particular Felgor Ravagers, who are kind of the menace right now. And I guess you pair that with the fact that I don't think they're that bad in a Commandos or Vet Guard either. I don't necessarily think they were like winning into those teams, but they're doing better than most teams were. And not a lot of people have good reps into them. They're not a
Yeah.
particularly common team at the top level. So all in all, it just felt like the right choice, and I went with my gut and played a team that I liked, and it worked out.
Great. Yeah.
And
So
yeah, Ryan, and you went Vet Guard,
I
so
yeah
you have
I
not really played them a lot. But what kind of pushed you into that direction?
What kind of pushed me in that direction was they had been sitting on my painting table unfinished for since the team came out. Like I had the majority of the team like painted to like I guess a battle ready standard, but I really wanted to have an excuse to get them on the table and finish them. And
Right.
also, I thought they were very, very strong. And at the time of Adepticon, they were. Um,
Yeah.
since the tournament, obviously the balanced data slate has come out, and they have lost a lot of their like core functions, I guess you could
Hmm.
say. But we can talk about that later on, probably after we've gone through
Yeah.
our kind of Adepticon wrap up here.
Both our
But
teams are drastically different
they're
now.
very different teams now, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so But yeah, I really wanted to just like take the time to lock in with this team that was very, very good. I knew I didn't want to take an elite team. I'm usually a Space Marines player, so um, with the way the meta had evolved between January and Adepticon, I knew that like elites were out for me. So I wanted to lock in with the team that I had the most reps with. That was very strong. And that was Vanguard. So that's why I wound up
Right.
going with them.
Very cool. Very
Mm-hmm.
cool. Where did we want to go next? So, I mean, there's we went to Adepticon. I did play in the pods on Thursday. I
That's
can
right.
briefly talk about that really quick.
Sure.
Um, that was like the test run, I guess, for Higher Tech before the big one. And I ended up going 3-1 and getting second place. I lost in the finals to Jonathan Reynolds, who was playing Wormblade. And I do end up playing Jonathan in the GT later on, so it's kind of an interesting like wraparound. But um, it's pretty interesting because this was my only loss the whole time I was at Adepticon was against Jonathan here in the finals of the pods on Thursday. Which, for those of you uninitiated, the pods were like a side event where you get to just play in a little like 16 player like pod style RTT,
Yeah.
and it's just 4 rounds and it's isolated. It's separate from the GT on the weekend. Um, and I ended up losing to him on open board on secure. And it's funny because I played 11 games of Higher Tech on the weekend, and I wanted to make a note of this because this was my one loss. A lot of people have said that Higher Tech you can't take them to a big tournament and expect to win because previously with reanimation being on a 3-up, you are bound to, you know, flub a reanimation roll that's crucial at some point and lose because of it. This was my only loss of the tournament, and it was not because of a failed reanimation roll. It was not really a dice thing. It was just I made some major misplays, and Jonathan played really well. So I just thought it was important to highlight that. I don't feel like there was a much of a real reanimation problem if you play the team the right way. But my games and pods were fun. I played against my first round was against Wormblade, also separate Wormblade player. I do not remember his name. I think it was Stefan. My second round was against Hunter Clade. Yes, it was Hunter Clade. I think his name is Tyler, and he ended up doing pretty well in his bracket in the GT. And then I played against Hand of the Archon. His name is Brett, and he did pretty well in the GT as well. I think he went 3-1 on day one, and then took second in his pod on day two. Um, and then I lost to Jonathan in the finals on Warblade. So without going super in depth on those games, so that was a fun run. I felt a little better by the end of it because I think it's nice when you lose a game with your team and you can come away from it. Like obviously there's the immediate salt afterwards of
Oh
like, oh,
yeah.
I lost. That was so dumb. But the highlight of that for me was coming away from it being like, you know what, that was like totally me. Like I actually totally could have won that game. It wasn't the team. It wasn't like I've taken this defective thing and now it's getting exposed. It's like that was winnable and I can brush up and improve on some things and just sharpen up and then feel comfortable in the GT. And yeah, so pods is fun.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to actually going back to what you said about the reanimation on a 3-up.
Hmm.
Um, what I wanted to ask you was, if you're counting on if you're relying on those 3-ups in order to seal you a win, are you playing Hyrotech wrong? Do you think that players could be like relying too much on their resurrection protocols?
So I've thought about this quite a bit the last few days, actually, especially because now they've buffed reanimation to a 2-up, and I've been
Yes.
trying to weigh, does that change how I play? Do I approach it differently? And I think there's arguments to be made that you can play differently now with that 2-up being the case. But my thoughts on it are basically that I rarely find myself in situations where and I've got a lot of higher tech games under my belt now. And I can say that I haven't found myself in many situations in games where, I have a reanimation roll, and if I fail this roll, I'm going to lose. But I do find myself in situations in close games where it's like, maybe I'll win, maybe I won't, and I have a reanimation roll, and I know if I make this game's over for me. Like I'm going to win this game if I make this roll. So it's not so much of like I need this to win, but the reanimation kicking off in that third or fourth round is more like the kind of dagger to like
Right.
seal like what is otherwise already a pretty close game. And truthfully, even when it was a 3-up, I know it's somebody in the comments is going to tell a story, but you are going to make it more than you're going to fail it. And it's always any given reanimation rolls is likely to happen on a 66% chance back then. Now it's higher.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it doesn't feel like a crutch to me so much that the team needs to function rather than a really, really, really strong ability that can win you games, if that makes sense. Because I think there's a
Yeah.
subtle difference.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah, so let's go ahead now and talk about, I guess, our day ones,
Yeah.
our day one games. I'll start us off here if you're all right with that. All right, so day one, round one, I'm paired up against Sisters Novitiates, against a player who you had told me actually prior to the start of the game that had come up to you and introduced himself and was a fan of the podcast. So if you're watching, thank you uh, for watching us. You know, it was really an awesome experience going to Adepticon, and pretty much every single person I talked to recognized both you and I from the podcast and the YouTube channel. So that was an awesome experience. Uh, all my opponents were great at this tournament. So, um, Shane, were you familiar with the? I don't know if you had to play on this board at all during the tournament. It was an Octarius board. It was obviously it was open. It was Octarius, but the larger heavy pieces formed like an X.
Yes.
Are you
I
familiar
played
with that
against
layout?
Jonathan. Yeah, both my games against Jonathan's were in Blade, both in pods and on
Mm-hmm.
GT were on this map. Yes.
Okay. Were you deploying on the short ends or the long sides?
The short
Because I
edge.
had to I had to deploy on the short edge too, and uh, that was interesting.
Oh, like where it pointed out instead of being flat,
The
like the
shorter
building.
edge the shorter edges of the board
Yeah,
is
yeah,
where
yeah.
our deployment zones were. Yeah. So I hated this. I hated this map layout so much. I think it was the second or least favorite um, map layout at the tournament. I think the vast majority of the boards were pretty good. I think there were just two that stuck out to me that I wasn't a fan of. But um, game one, we open up. I think I just took like the typical in terms of tac ops, like the security faction tac op two. I think I took either secure centerline or escort operative. I almost certainly didn't take escort operative this game. And then I took protect assets. I definitely took protect assets.
Yes, because we talked about that one
Yeah.
after.
Um, this game turned out to be very low scoring.
Yeah.
I think the final score was 11-10 in my favor. We got through all 4 rounds. That's with the painting score.
Oh my God, I
I'm
didn't
pretty
realize it
sure.
was that
I'm
low. Oh
pretty
my God,
sure it was with the painting score. Yeah. So ridiculously low
9 to 8.
scoring game. Um, this game was an absolute bloodbath from the get go. Turn one, I think on
And
my,
it was loot, right?
I believe this was loot.
Yeah.
Yes. So like both him and I had to get our models out onto the board to actually start looting points. Um, I was able to do that with the kind of GA2 shenanigans with the just the regular veteran troopers on either side of the board, just pushing up and looting those points. Um, uh, and then I was actually able to. He had set up one of his Pyre sisters, or the one of the novitiates with the flamer, had set them up on engage in his deployment zone in an area where I could draw a line of sight to it with my grenade launcher,
Ooh.
right in a big blob. So I think it was literally like my second or third activation. I noticed that, and I go, "Oh, all right, we're gonna shoot with my frag grenade into this gigantic cluster of sisters." Nobody died, but I think like 4 of them took like at least some chip damage.
Yeah.
Um, he got me back though later on in the game by having one of his the another one of his sisters with the flamer do like a dash and then do a like the DACA dash that the commando can do.
Mhm.
Uh, pretty much like across the board and
Yeah.
kill 6 of my veteran guardsmen in one activation.
My God.
Yeah.
Holy
And
moly.
up until that point, I felt like I was in absolute control of the game, and I think I maxed the primary score, um, both turn one and turn two, and I think that is basically what sealed it for me, was just getting an early lead so quickly before he was able to kind of come around and start dealing some real damage to me. Um, yeah, incredibly close game to start off, incredibly low scoring. So
Yeah.
how did your game one go?
So my first round was against a actually another Hyrotech player.
Mm,
There was quite a few at Adepticon. It was kind of funny.
how many were there
I think there
total?
I want to say there was 4 of us. Could be wrong on that. Might have been
It
three or
was either
four. I think
three
there
or
was
four. I was reading the Goonhammer article.
yeah, there was 3 or 4, and then there's also one Tomb World player, which
Oh,
was kind of
that's
funny,
right.
like
That's right. Yeah.
compendium. So basically, my first round, I'm playing against Necrons, with my Necrons, and we're on open board. It's loot, and we both took Chronomancer. We both took the Nanomine. We both took Chronometron. I think we both took a Death Mark and 3 Immortals, and we both took Gauss Blasters, and we both took the Entropic Lance on the Chronomancer. We took the exact same stuff. My opponent was super nice, really cool guy. He told me right at the beginning he was pretty inexperienced with the team on like a competitive level, and then we kind of like kept checking up on each other throughout the tournament, just to see how like the other was doing. Um, his dice were absolutely horrible. I mean, just beyond awful. He had bought the. He's funny because the day before on Friday, I went to the Baron of Dice vendor that they had set up at
Yeah.
Adepticon, and I was looking at the Necron dice, like with the tomb face on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I should get those maybe. And I thought about it, and I was like, no, I'm good. I have dice. And then I play this game with this guy on Saturday, and he's got those dice that I was looking at. And let me tell you, I'm really glad I didn't get those
Oh,
dice because they're
jeez.
cursed. He rolled so many ones, it was
The
shocking.
Pharaon's curse.
At one point, his Despotek fired into me with balanced and a reroll from Demand, and literally he's hitting on twos, 4 shots, and he had 3 1s and like a 3, and then rerolled the 1 into like a 2, so he had 2 hits, and then I just saved them both. Um, that happened a few times, I feel. But he was very gracious about it. He laughed really hard every time it happened to him. So props to him. And
Yeah.
he ended up. I remember I talked to him on day 2 near the end, and I asked him like, um, like, how you doing? And he goes, there's like 2 rounds left at this point, and he's like,
Yeah.
I haven't won a game yet. And I'm like, oh, well, that's too bad. And then we touched base after, and he said, I won my last 2 games. And then that was the
Nice.
most feel good moment ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very much, he put his death mark onto one of the midline objectives in heavy cover from the deep strike and eluded the point. But I kind of figured he was going to do that because I did it on the other side with my death mark, and I had my Despotech on engage behind an Octarius wall. And I gave him Chronometron and I gave him an APL, and he moved dash 10 inches and exploded the death mark. And the next turn I won initiative. His death mark reanimated, but I just shot him again and killed him. So immediately having that like 1 up on the activation count was really big too. Um, and other than that, it was just a lot of, trying to just out trade and his dice being really bad and mine being really good. Having 2 nanomines down on the board at the same time was really funny. Yeah, I did have to experience the nanomine against me once this tournament, so I know the pain. But yeah, it was a nice game. It was a fun game.
hmm So, going into round two, I was paired up against Daniel and his Chaos Cult. So naturally, this was on Into the Dark. So naturally, I was kind of like, oh, okay, this could be it.
Nightmare.
This is a nightmare scenario, yeah. Um, Fortunately, during deployment, I think basically one of the sides of my opponent's deployment zone, he only set up, I think, like three models, just two of the basic cultists, and I think like the mutant that you start the game with, if I'm remembering correctly, or just another like devotee, and then at some point he had his leader transform it into a mutant or whatever. However
Mhm.
that team works. Anyway, one thing that I've noticed, especially when you're playing on Into the Dark, especially with a team like Vetguard where you have so many bodies, and so many of those bodies are like genuine threats. Plasma Gunner, Melta Gunner, Demo Mine, etc. Is that you can choose a point on the board to just kind of like overload and just absolutely go to war and just like trade up with your opponent. Um, and so if your opponent doesn't like evenly distribute like their models, I guess, to contest you at like at key points, you're going to be able to score faction tac op 2 like almost every single time. You're going to be able to, you know,
Let's
score
stand fast, right?
get more. Yeah, that's stand fast. So you're going to be getting more on primary almost every single time. This was secure, I think, round
Yes.
two. Yeah. Um. Also, like I think it was the mutants and the torments not being able to perform mission actions helped me out a lot in this because of that. But yeah, it was a very back and forth game. It was a game that was not as close as my first one. Um, I think my opponent made a few mistakes regarding which models he chose to target in melee combats. Um, and I was kind of just, the Vetguard, they have so many bodies. It's like if you charge a ready guy, I can just fall back with him, and then you've only have one torment on this side of the board, and that's it. And my Melta Gunner's here waiting in the wings. I'm just gonna walk up and blast you. Immediately deal 4 mortals. You failed all your feel no pains. I own this side of the board now. And that's basically how that game broke down. So a pretty solid win in my book, but it was a great game nonetheless. So yeah, round two I was feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good with the Vet Guard.
Yeah, my round two, I saw the pairings and I was like, please give me an easy game. Please. I saw all the good players were winning, so I was like, all right, odds are probably going to get a tough opponent, but it's like half the field, so you know.
hmm
And I checked the pairings and I got Janice, who was playing Felgors, and it gets worse because I checked the board and we're playing on Into the Dark.
Nightmare
So
scenario.
yeah, a little bit tough. So I hadn't actually played against Felgors yet. I don't think with Higher Attack. I had like theorized the matchup in my brain and I thought it was a really good matchup, but I don't know if it was like quite there yet, especially for Into the Dark against a good player, which Janice is a very good player. Um, so on this game, I came in with the mindset of, all right, I'm going to try my hardest to do as much damage as I can on turn one, and from there, hope I can, just hold off until the end of the game and try to score my attack ops. So I believe it was the first activation on turn one. I used the um, Death Mark 4 deploy to open a door, and then I went first with my Chronomancer. I think it was like my first activation. It was an early activation, and I flew him up. I stole an APL. I opened a door, and I shot one or two Felgor operatives, and I frenzied one of them. Can't remember which one it was that I frenzied, but it really like slowed down that side of the board for her, like right off the bat. And on the other side, I chronometroned my Despotech and gave him an APL so that way he could move dash. Or he could. I had used intractable march, so he had a 9-inch move, so he could just move, open the door, and shoot. I think. And I think I shot and did some damage to something or killed something, and then I had my other immortal who was also on engage move up and go on guard because I could. Um, I think there was like some shot that I was able to set up if she came in and she had to come in, so she did, and I got another shot and I frenzied another guy. And so I basically was we went 3-3 in primary turn one. Um and I had an early attrition lead just from frenzying the two goats. And I think one of them I was able to actually uh basically outright kill because the goat that I killed that I frenzied with my chronomancer hadn't gone yet. So it had to just go and it was stunned as well, and it was like it must have been the gong. It was one of the three operatives she didn't give war paint to, so the stun actually affected it. So not only was it frenzied, but it was -1 APL, I think. Um, so basically, it could only do one action, which so you can't charge and fight, so it just died. And the other one, I think I might have frenzied it with the Despo and finished it off with a guy in card, maybe. Um, but yeah, so I I got an early lead there, and I was kind of trying to hold the middle of the board down as much as I could with one of my immortals, and she eventually broke through and killed that guy and used the ploy to charge my Apprentech, who was right behind that guy, which almost threw the game away for me. Honestly, it was kind of a big mistake to put my Apprentech in range to like not think about that. Fortunately, I had killed enough things and gotten enough primary in the first couple turns that by the end of the game, I was able to get my tac ops. I think I denied some of her tac ops, and I think I only ended up winning by 1 point, despite having like a really strong turn one and a good turn two.
Mm.
It was very, very close and really well played from JNS, but went 2-0 on Into the Dark. So that's my first win against Felgors, and I played them 3 times this tournament. So, spoiler alert.
Yeah. So, before we get into game three here, what was the name of that ploy that enables like the free charge, basically?
Oh God, you can't ask me the names of the Felgor place. They're all just the
The
same to me.
the
I
people
think it's
want to
like
know.
I think it's unending bloodshed. They have a ploy called that. I think that's the one where you if you kill something you can pay a CP and charge 3 inches into another
Mm-hmm.
guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let me make
That
sure.
sounds about
No, it's
right.
not. It's not unending bloodshed. It's called ruthless rampage.
Oh, okay.
And she used it to kill one immortal and then
Mm-hmm.
charge into my Apprentech, which was really terrible for
Mm-hmm.
me. Now, in the current day and age where my Apprentice is 3 APL, wouldn't have been so bad because he
No.
can fall back and shoot
Yep.
or do anything, really.
Yeah.
And you have to like kind of be careful with the models that you choose to put in danger on turn 3 because you need to have those non-plasmacyte operatives alive for uh what's it called?
Oh, the
Unyielding Ancient,
yes,
faction
yep,
tac op 1 for higher tech circle. So
yeah. You
and
actually
that was like
want
a
to you actually want to explain how that faction tac op is scored because this is something that I think we probably should have covered at the start of this podcast was talking about like the tac ops that we typically found ourselves taking over and over again with our teams.
yeah, so I think so during the course of the tournament I only took 4 different tac ops. Um, I always ran faction tac op 1 for higher tech circle, that is Unyielding Ancients, which basically says you need to have 3 of your models, your non-plasmacyte models, so 6 of your 8 models. You need 3 of them at the end of the game to be within 6 inches of the center of the board and or within 6 of your opponent's drop zone. And you get a point. And then if one of those 3 is your Cryptech or a Prentech, you get the second point. Now, as long as you haven't been like almost tabled, this is usually pretty much free 2 victory points because it doesn't sound like a lot, but 6 inches from the middle and 6 inches from your opponent's drop zone is like more than half. It's well more than half the
Yeah.
board, I'd say. It's a
Mm-hmm.
huge percentage of the board, and it's all forward for the most part. So it's spots where you're going to be anyway. And I would routinely, I always took escort operative. Higher tech circle is very good at this because you pick your escort operative on turn 2, and if they die on turn 2 or turn 3, they can actually still come back to life through reanimation and score you that tac op. And it also pairs well with Unyielding Ancients because in order to get 2 victory points from an escort operative, that guy needs to be in a spot where he's also hitting the requirements for Unyielding Ancients. And then I would usually on the third tac op, I would pair it with Seize Ground or Seize Access Point if I'm on Into the Dark. And again, I would put that in a spot where it's either within 6 of the center of the board or within 6 of the my opponent's drop zone. So all 3 of my tac ops, most games were scoring at the end of the game, so I could get like a big 6 point boost and catch up. And also, this allowed me in the first 3 turns to pretty much focus on board state, scoring primary, and killing enemy operatives, and not going on like side quests and doing random stuff like grabbing an
Right.
item or standing, getting 4 APL in X location for the end of the turn.
Yeah.
I could just play the game and not worry about stupid tac ops until turn 4. And then ideally, I've chosen tac ops where I'm going to be in a spot that is somewhat natural and conducive to that game plan. And that was something I learned as I played more throughout the tournament, especially with Seize Ground, where at first my instinct was to take, Seize Ground, you pick a piece of heavy terrain more than 3 inches from your drop zone, and you have to control it at the end of the game. So the instinct for most players and for myself was pick the closest heavy terrain possible because it's harder for your opponent to get to. Pick something right outside of 3 inches. But I found that when I was doing that, it was a lot harder to score because it's not, it wasn't always near unyielding ancients or escort, like the within 6 of the center, within 6 of my opponent's drop zone for like escort, and I would have trouble getting all 3 with what I had left because you
Mm-hmm.
only have so many bodies left. So actually, by the end of the tournament, I was starting to pick pieces of terrain that were almost closer to my opponent's edge, usually on a flank, because I could just win that side of the board. And then I'm just by winning that side of the board, I'm basically getting 6 tac op points. So that's a really, I think, a good strategy. The only time I deviated from that tac op choice was if I was playing against a team with 12 or more bodies, I would swap out Seize Ground for Protect Assets. Because Protect Assets against a true horde, so like 12 or more operatives, is really, really natural and free for the most part. I've not failed to score it. I think it gets really hard if you take it versus a team with less than 12 bodies. But against like Wormblade or Chaos Cult or like Vet Guard, especially, I think you take that and it's very easy to get. And also, just a team with 12 bodies can very easily deny you the second point on Seize Ground just by having one guy alive at the end of the game that can just bolt up. So that was basically how I did my tech ops with higher tech circle. And I never took recon, which is something that people do with higher tech because they can choose security or recon. I think I'm pretty much over the option to choose recon at this point. Um, it's just too out of the way for me, in my opinion.
Okay. Interesting. So for my tac ops, I mean, with Vet Guard, you're kind of locked in. You know, you take,
Yeah.
at least in my case, I took security. Obviously, you have to. I took Faction Tac Op 2, which is stand fast. The way that works is you have to control at least two objectives, and you need to be holding more objectives than your opponent. So usually with your numbers, that is easy to do, particularly in the early game. Um, Depending on what kind of like deployment situation, what kind of map layout you have. Then, depending on how many models there are on the other team, I took protect assets. So I think against Chaos Cult, I took protect assets. Against the novitiates, like I mentioned, I had taken protect assets, but I wouldn't recommend that. Um, so that was one that I routinely was using, and then escort operative was sometimes my third one, but I don't think I scored escort operative at all this entire tournament, so I think I only took it twice, and both times failed to score it.
Yeah, you were usually putting it on your confidant, right?
I put it on my confidant in our game because it was convenient to do so. Oh, spoiler
Mhm.
alert. We haven't talked about our third game yet, but Shane and I got paired up. We'll get more into that soon here. Um yeah, so protect assets, escort operative. Seize access point was one I took. And
You
not
took
so
center line,
not
right?
so cute. Yes,
Right?
I took center line in our game. So I actually got I played a lot of different tac ops throughout the course of this tournament. Honestly, I think the at that time, I think Vetguard's weakest link, I guess, would be their tac op selection.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, my tac ops were not very high scoring. It was the majority of the score came from the primary objectives, which is they're very very good at scoring on primary objectives. Security tac ops, not as much. Um, But yeah, so let's go ahead now and dive into our third game. So at this point in the tournament, Shane, both you and I were 2-0 on day one.
Yeah.
And then I get done with my second game, and you come over to me and you say, "It's us." And I go, "Ah, man, I said something else, but I don't want to swear here." Um, so, uh,
Yeah.
so our game was this was capture, I believe at this point because we had played
Yes.
loot and secure already. And we were playing on Into the Dark. Um, and so I mean, honestly, like, I don't know now if I would have rather faced you on open.
I
Like,
think,
I think I would have preferred to play on Into the Dark against your team. I
yeah,
was
I can
unsure
even
at the
see that.
time, but looking back, um, just because there's walls that like your crypt deck can't fly through, you know?
Right. Yeah, the Alpha Strike scared a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, it's really close. I think both of our teams prefer open board. I always tend to like higher attack on Into the Dark, or on open board more, but I've really enjoyed higher attack on Into the Dark. I think more than other higher attack players I've talked to. I played on it like 3 or 4 times during the tournament,
Mm-hmm.
5, I think, if you include pods. And I always felt really comfortable on there.
Yeah.
Um, so like, I don't know, it's weird because you basically, and this is I guess a thing I glossed over in the last game against Janice, but whenever I play Into the Dark, I take Tesla carbines. Um, because the percentage to kill, I believe, is pretty much always higher on Into the Dark with Tesla carbines because it gets lethal 5.
Right.
Um, and like the
What's the
residuals,
keyword
it's
for that
splash.
weapon? Splash, yeah.
Yeah, so like the residual splash damage that like, the mortal wounds that you pour around whenever you shoot with your immortals is like pretty immense. You really like just put out like passive damage as you play, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and it's basically the Tesla carbines on Into the Dark are better than any gun you can take anywhere else with the immortals. It's better than anything. It's better than the Gauss, obviously. Which makes it the strongest weapon that you can get with an immortal. So on that level, Into the Dark improves the lethality of your team, and also I think on Into the Dark it's easier to get within 6 inches on your shooting attacks. So it's easier to get your Relentless Onslaught reroll, the strategic play to get a reroll if you're shooting an enemy within 6 inches. Um, and you can still Alpha Strike on Into the Dark with higher attack. But Ryan, you did a really good job in our game of spacing out. You were very aware that I was setting up for it, or at least threatening it.
Yeah, so the way that I deployed, I was kind of waiting to see where your Cryptek would drop. Because when did your Cryptek actually drop? Was it your second or your third drop during
It
our
was
game?
always I always dropped him in my third group.
In
So
your third group, okay. So I was looking at the board and I had figured that you would probably wind up deploying him on the right side just because that hallway on the edge, the doorway to it was closer to you than it was to me. So I figured if you're going to wind up coming through a doorway and potentially alpha strike some of my team, it's going to be through that side where the doors are closer to you.
mhm.
Um, so everybody on that side, I almost deployed them in like this weird checkerboard formation where they were all like just outside of 2 inches from each other. Just so that it's like, okay, if you do want to come out and do this alpha strike with your blast weapon, which actually I don't remember the profile or the name for that blast attack, but do you mind telling us what that was?
So the Chronomancer has the Ion Stave, which is 5 attacks on threes, damage 3/3, lethal 5 up, even if you're not on Into the Dark, and blast 2 inches and stun.
Yeah,
So it's not like auto killing stuff, although against guardsmen it usually will.
yeah,
But blast and stun is really, really good. So yeah.
yeah. So bearing that in mind, and knowing that I have the ability turn one to move everybody up the board 3 inches regardless, with the into the breach strategic ploy, plus being able to give the entire team plus 1 inch to their normal movements with move move move. I felt like I could afford to deploy at least like a rank, kind of like back and outside of two, from everybody, and still be able to like effectively play this game, not fall behind on like primary scoring or anything like that. Um, and then so because your Cryptek did wind up going down on that side, I think on the opposite side of the board you had, I think it was like your Immortal, it was like your Despotek and your Apprentech, I think, or it was an Immortal and the Apprentech. But that was the only two models you had that you sent to the opposite side of the board. And that, so remember what I said earlier about being able to, with just the vet guard numbers, being able to overload these points on the board if your opponent isn't able to like equally spread. Um, I had like I had two veteran guardsmen, I had like one other model, and then I had my plasma gunner and my grenade launcher all going down that one corridor
Yeah.
on the opposite side, and it did bite me in the butt a little bit with like the splash coming off, but it's like there's only two models to my four, and one of my guys has a plasma gun. I feel okay with this whole situation. Plus, I have in Death Atonement in my back pocket, so I felt okay with that. And what did you take for your tac ops in this game?
I believe I took Protect Assets because I was playing Vetguard.
Yep.
I took Escort Operative and I took Unyielding Ancients.
hmm I took Central Control. I took Faction
Nice.
Tac Op 2. Um, uh, and then
You took
I took
Escort
Escort
Operative.
Operative. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it was really the game was it was very back and forth. It was close, but I think I held the lead until basically, I mean, literally until the end of the game. I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Just
I
because of your
won.
tac op scoring at the end there.
Yeah, I had 4 TAC op score in the last turn.
hmm
In the last, well, yeah, at the end of the last turn.
Yeah.
I think the thing that kind of swung into my favor was my Despotech surviving on that
Yes.
flank that you'd
Yeah.
overloaded.
So let's talk about this play
Yeah, this was pretty wild.
because this was a very good play by me. Not to toot my own horn here, but um,
I agree. It
I
was.
let me tell you, Shane. I don't know if you could tell, but this was the most locked in I've ever been in a kill team tournament game
I could tell.
because I was playing against you. So um, speaking of that hallway with my plasma gunner and the grenade launcher on it. Um, at this point in the game, you had your Despotech on the objective in that hallway, and I had, I think, 2 models over on that same side. I believe one was a regular veteran guardsman and a plasma gunner.
I think it was your spotter.
It was, yes, it was my spotter.
Yeah.
That's what that other model was, which was actually huge because I was able to get an early shot off of the plasma gun because of that spotter. Um, so your Despotech at this point in time, I think, has 1 wound remaining.
He
Are there
has
1 or 2?
two.
Yeah, he's
He
got
has two.
he has 2 wounds remaining. My spotter and my plasma gunner are on this
No,
point.
he had three,
Uh huh.
but later he has one.
Yes.
That comes in. Okay.
Yeah. So I forget what the exact situation was, but your Despotech winds up charging into both of these models, locking them up in combat. Um, and then I don't remember if you fought with that model.
So I didn't fight with the model.
Yes.
I can tell you exactly what happened. I
Oh
remember this.
no, I think you did
Maybe I
because
fought and killed
so you
something.
you charged and you fought and I believe you took 2 points of damage during this fight, but
It
you
brought me down to 1 health. Yeah.
yeah, it brought you down to 1 health and you killed the spotter. So
Yes.
what I did in response was I used in Death Atonement to keep my spotter alive for the next activation. The reason I did this was so that my plasma gunner he gets the combat support if if that spotter is still in that combat. And the way in Death Atonement works, it was ruled uh, was that the model that is kept alive even though it died,
Yeah. And the
is
reason this I think
it's
was so crucial is because your plasma gunner was injured, so he would have been hitting on
yes,
fives, but the combat support makes it so that you're hitting on fours, and your odds of getting that one hit to push through and kill me are exponentially higher.
yes, yes, they were exponentially higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I rolled the dice and I didn't score 1 hit and the plasma gunner died.
No, no, no. You did get a hit.
Oh
This is
yes,
why
no
it
no
was
no,
so
that's right.
crazy.
It's even worse. Yeah, the hit
So
goes
the
through.
Despo,
Yeah.
yeah, the Despotech had the 5 up Feel No Pain from the Chronometron, and he has 1 health left, and you hit him for 2 damage.
Yep.
And I roll both of my 5 up Feel No Pains, and I proceed to kill the plasma, and then both of the guardsmen just die.
Yep.
And I
And
think without that play, I think I probably lose. Um,
yeah.
and I say this genuinely, not just because you are my podcast partner, but because I think it's the truth. I think this is in all of my 7 games in the GT. I think this game is the closest I came to losing, and the one game where I feel I genuinely should have probably lost. So yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a great
Yeah.
game. Um, I thought myself taking central control
It was really good
was a
because there was
really
the
good
long.
choice.
It's the one with the long horizontal hallway going through,
Yes.
kind of connecting the two middle rooms.
Yeah.
Um, and I had barricaded it off a little bit to like stop your like Melta and Plasma from coming to me.
So I had a barricade set up at the end of that hallway to, in case of you trying to charge around,
Yeah.
just to kind of like impede your movement, basically.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So I think that was the one tac op that I actually managed to max that game, if I'm not mistaken, with central control, because you killed my escort operative.
Yeah.
Because he had to go onto that point and kill that Despotech just to like
Yes.
get the point to try and score the other faction tac op. I may have also maxed my faction tac op too, I believe. Um
Yeah. Stand fast. I know. I think you got at least 1 point on stand fast.
yeah, oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. The escort operative was a good one. I think what caused me a lot of trouble was on that flank. I had put my Chronomancer in engage because I
Oh
wanted to threaten
yes.
that side.
Mhm.
And when you didn't give me anything to shoot, I'm like, well, I've got a 4-up in Muln. I'll be in cover. I should be pretty much fine. And takeaway is, sniper rifles do not care about 4-up in Mulns. They
No,
don't
they
care
do
about your
not.
armor.
Yeah.
And your sniper did a lot of damage to my Cryptek
He was
and to
cooking.
yeah. So there was a lot of like attrition on that side. I used my mine pretty much primarily to just stop your demo from blowing me up. And that pretty much worked. I don't think your demo ever went off.
I'll
Um,
I'll be honest, Shane, when I saw the Cryptek go down, I knew that I was never going to be able to get my demo mine in that room.
yeah,
So I was consigned to just use him as an objective grabber.
it's pretty much what he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your hardened came in and gave me a lot of trouble too over
Oh
there,
yeah.
just in melee, actually.
Yeah.
Um, I had a lot of moments in this tournament, and it started in this game and it kept happening, where my plasma sights were just like going off
Oh
and
my
shooting. Like
god, yeah.
every time I shoot with a plasma sight with higher tech, I do like 2 crits in a hit minimum. I don't know why. I don't know. It's because it's 4 attacks on fours. It's a las gun with 3-inch range. The thing is, whenever you're shooting it, you're probably going to have balanced because of the reroll ploy. Um, and it just always does so well. I don't know why. I mean, I'm usually not shooting things that have good armor saves anyway, but those guys are clutch against guardsmen and like
Yeah.
Felgors and stuff.
Yeah. So I believe the finals, what was the final score for this game? This must have been pretty high, I thought.
I think it was like 17-15 or something,
Yeah.
17-16. It was 1 or 2 points. I
Mhm.
know.
It was a 2 point differential because I remember
Yeah.
we were measuring out at the end of the game for your
Escort
model
operative.
for
Yeah.
your escort operative, yeah. And
Because
at some point I was just like, "Oh, I mean, I'm still going to lose because of the point differential. It doesn't even matter really if you score this point or not, but
yeah, for some reason I wasn't sure. I was like miscounting, and I thought I needed it to not tie, but yeah. Um, I think I won by 2 points. So
yes.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
All right. So and then we go into round four, the final
Mhm.
round. I'm 3-0 now, and you're now 2-1.
Yep.
Um, and Ryan, do you want to talk about your fourth game?
Sure. So, my fourth game was against Blooded, and after the game with Shane, I'm feeling very, very good about uh, what Vetguard wants to do on the table. Um, I think this was like peak confidence with Vetguard. This was like peak flow state, I guess you could call it, with the Vetguard. Um, and I'm paired up against Blooded. Um, and man, let me tell you, at this point in time, Blooded were just worse Vetguard.
Oh yeah.
And I really think that that fact is what made the game. It was a pretty dominant victory for the Vetguard, and I think it was just because of that. I thought it was weird when my opponent did not take the Bulgrin. He instead chose to take like they have like do they have like a 4 ancillary trooper
Yeah,
type
so
thing? Because he opted for
basically,
that.
yeah, the Bulgrin and the Commissar are both, you can either take them each, or for each one you don't take, you get 2 troopers. And you guys are on secure, right?
I believe we were at this point, yeah.
I can see the argument for not taking the Ogren against other, like a team with plasma, because the plasma theoretically can just rip
It'll
through an
just smoke you,
Ogren.
yeah.
Yeah, so I see that somewhat frequently. Did he take the Commissar?
He did take the Commissar, yeah.
Okay.
Um, I don't think this player had many reps into Vetguard because of where I had positioned my demo mine, and I had given him +1 APL turn 1, I think it was. Because with the Into the Breach, I was able to get past the Octarius terrain and be able to threaten a mid-board objective, basically. Um, so because of that, he wound up basically wasting an activation with his Commissar, kind of like moving him forward, issuing an order, and then just like dashing back somewhere. But then my spotter was able to come out and spot him, I think, for my plasma gunner or my grenade launcher and just kill him.
Hmm.
Um, and then unfortunately for my opponent, he had his model with the diabolic bomb, their grenadier or whatever, uh, run up the board, uh, was totally able to throw the diabolic grenade into my demo and my sergeant,
Ooh.
and I think my commissar as well, like all in one go. And I think he just completely whiffed every
Oh,
single roll for that.
that's
And I mean
awful.
that at that point it was just like all downhill for him. Unfortunately, my dice were really hot. Um, I believe I scored like 21 points that game. It was like 21-14 or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so with that record, that wound up because of the strength of schedule was the second tiebreaker.
The
'Cause it
strength
was
schedule is the main tiebreaker.
yes, it was win loss, and then it was strength of schedule for the main tiebreaker. So that was able to get me into number 8 overall on day one and clinch top 8. So I was super stoked for that. Um,
Yep.
so how did your final game go on the day?
Yeah, so my fourth game, I'm 3-0, and I get paired against his name is Eric, who is also 3-0, and he was playing Corsairs. So Corsairs is actually not a team I had played against with Higher Tech before. And I actually hadn't played against Corsairs one time since they got their most recent buffs to Deadly Ambush and Outcasts. And we're playing on Secure on open board, and let me tell you, the Deadly Ambush ploy where you can charge a guy um, that comes near you is extremely good. It was really hard to play against. And there was a moment in turn 2 where I'm like checking my threats and my options, and I'm like, I can't go near any operative on this team without getting like reactively charged and my play getting shut down. So I'm not 100% sure how I'm supposed to approach this. Um, and I was able, I think, to get some shots off on turn 1, maybe not. Um, but uh, I took Gauss Blasters, which it's basically a crack grenade, profiles 4-5 damage, AP1 on threes, 4 shots on threes. And that just like cuts through Corsairs. Like they just, if you get the chance to shoot a Corsair with an Immortal, the Corsair's dead, probably. Um, Now, I was able to be pretty aggressive with my Cryptek on turn 2, and I think I killed something with it. And then kind of brought it back a little bit to pull back, and he ended up coming in to kill my Cryptek, which I was fine with, because a lot of my strategy this tournament and with higher tech in general is I try to play a pretty passive turn 1, but I threaten a lot of, unless I'm playing against like a melee team, I go pretty passive turn 1, but I threaten an Alpha Strike, so that way my opponent has to play pretty conservative in their deployment and like not give me too much. They have to keep my opponent honest with like really long threat ranges. And then on turn 2, I try to be really, really aggressive. And because if I do that, then I can ideally I'm trading up, I'm killing things, and my opponent might kill a couple of my guys back. But the nice thing is between Reanimator and the Reanimation Ploy, those two guys are reanimating, they're getting their tokens down. And then because it's turn 2, I have 2 more turns where they can potentially reanimate. So I might fail the 3-up next turn, which happened a lot this tournament. But by turn 4, I'm probably not going to fail it a second time. At least, definitely not on both guys. One of the guys is going to get up. Then in turn 3, more guys might die, but more reanimation tokens are going to come down. And by turn 4, most of the guys who have died for me are probably coming back. And so I tried to do this game basically, and I got some kills turn 1. Right, I got some kills turn 2. I traded a little bit. And there was a moment where I'm like, I don't know who to walk up to with my immortals because I have like 4 guys that I could walk up and shoot, but because of Deadly Ambush, if I walk up to him, he's just going to pay a CP and charge me. So I'm like, I don't know what to do here. I have to let him charge me somewhere, else I'm never going to get a shot. So I see an opportunity and I'm like, all right, I'm going to move up with this immortal. He's got lethal 5 in melee because the equipment. 4 attacks on 3s, let's just walk up. And I walk up because if he doesn't pay a CP and charge me, I'm just going to shoot him off the board. So he pays a CP and charges me with, I think it was somebody with a power weapon, or maybe it was his mage, because his mage doesn't have a very good shooting weapon, or a very good melee weapon comparatively to the power weapon. And he decides to stop the charge, he decides to do the charge. And then I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to fight you. And I fight him, and I believe I got the kill, or I either got the kill or I brought him really low. But the important thing was that the ploy was now gone. So all the other parts of the board where I could walk up and shoot him, I was able to do that freely. And basically from that point on in the turn, I would walk up with an immortal, I'd kill a guy. I'd walk up with an immortal, I'd kill a guy. And 1 or 2 of those guys died, but that was okay because they came back in the next 2 turns. And I was just able to keep trading up. And I think one of the key things too was I had my escort operative kind of around the center of the board. And on turn 4, I gave him a chronometron for +3 inches to his movement, and I had intractable march on, and I gave him an APL, and he's able to move dash 12 inches down the board to get the 2 points for escort operative, and he was able to shoot and kill something, or maybe it was take a point with secure. So he's actually, he moved 9 inches, secured a point, and then dashed 3 within the 2-point area for escort operative, which was really big. And it was around this game where I started to kind of like start to realize how I should properly use my plasma sites. I think a lot of people struggle to plasma site usage a little bit, where on turn 1 and 2, they're just supporting my team. They're like kind of hiding. They're maybe nabbing backline objectives, and the accelerator is comms buffing guys, and the reanimator is staying just out of reach within 6 of some of my power pieces to reanimate them. But starting turn 3, well, actually starting turn 2, you start to activate the plasma sites later in the turn because you're focused on trading. So on turn 3, when this is happening, you activate them later in the turn, and I specifically, on secure or loot, I fly my plasma sites into a spot where they're useful, but just 6 inches away from his objectives that he controls. And then on turn 4, the turn starts, we're trading still, and then some of my last activations that I make on turn 4 are the plasma sites. Because they have fly, they can fly 6 inches from a relatively safe space and take my opponent's objectives. And this is a strategy that I pretty much used all my games from this point on. And it's even better in capture because you can do that exact thing, but 9 inches away. So basically just trading, killing Corsairs, and using my plasma sites to steal objectives like near the end of the turn were all really, really helpful strategies.
Yeah. The usage of the plasma sites in order to snipe primary objectives, or just like objectives,
Yeah.
in the end game is so clutch. Um,
Yeah, and
so
they can do
this,
it so freely.
yeah, and this was something you said that you didn't really figure out until like after these tournament games.
Yeah, it was kind of like I would sometimes do it, but it would just be like happenstance. Like I
Right.
wasn't setting up to steal objectives with my plasma sites. It was like it would be turn 4 and I'd be like, "Oh, I can do this."
Yeah.
But once I started actively thinking about it and forcing myself to think about it on turn 3, where I'm making a concerted effort to move those guys in a spot where they're just that far away from an objective for next turn, it started like clicking for me a lot.
Okay.
Um, because like I said, they fly. So you can be on the other side of an Octarius building and conceal like really safe. And your opponent's not trying to kill your plasma sites
No.
usually. They're trying to deal with the Despotak and the Immortals and the Chronomancer that are in their face. So, and this happened in the finals too against Felgors later, which we'll talk about. But um, it's really, really strong.
All right. So, yeah, end of day one. We're both in top eight. What did you finish overall, day one?
I think I was second place. I went 4-0.
Okay.
I think Leander was first and I was
Yeah.
second or something like
Oh,
that.
that's exactly how that worked out. Because day two, round one, I was
Oh,
paired
yeah.
up against Leander in a veteran guard mirror match.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Leander is a very, very good kill team player. And he has been playing vet guard a lot
It's
more
Worlds. Yeah.
seriously for a lot longer than I have. So I knew that going into our game, and he had a bunch of tricks with vet guard that I was not really even cognizant of. Um, I think the biggest play that he had, he mentioned it in the Goonhammer article where he was interviewed, um, using the comm specialist to give +1 APL to his spotter operative, like turn one. That way your spotter can like be hidden from the other veteran. This is like a specifically like a mirror match play, so that it can be hidden from your opponent's spotter turn one, and then it can move out, look at somebody and spot it for another operative, which comes out and then, does the whole vet guard double activate, shoot, kill a model thing. Um, so yeah, you being able to do that and then just having a much more intimate knowledge of the team that I did definitely gave him an advantage in our game, and he took it handedly, I will say. Like
Yeah,
I didn't,
Leander's very good.
yeah, like I didn't even remember that like my confidant has like the directive ability. Are you familiar with that one at all, Shane?
Yeah, that's like the GA2, right?
Yeah, basically. I just straight up did not even know that my confidant could do that.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. It's a
Yeah,
good ability. It's
yeah,
great on Into the Dark, especially because you can like open up a door and then have your demo like run in and blow something up.
yeah,
Um, so that's pretty cool. All right. Yeah,
yeah.
Leander, I had to play his veteran guard at Worlds. Um, this was after group stage, so we were both like not eligible to win anymore, but it was open board Octarius and I was Legionaries and he was Vetguard. And I talk about this game in our Worlds breakdown from like months ago. So if you want to hear about my pain and misery in that game, you
Yeah,
can go back to that video
yeah.
because it was a rough time.
But yeah, no. Shouts out to Leander. He's a very good player, very good opponent. So what did your round one of day two look like?
Yeah, so I was the second seed, which means I had to play the seventh seed for the quarterfinals. And that happened to be Janice, who I had
Oh,
just played
jeez.
yesterday in the second round. And once again, we end up on Into the Dark, this time on Loot. So it's Hieratech versus Felgors again on Loot. And I'm really scared of this matchup because in the last time I played Janice, I was able to get a lot of kills turn one through really early aggression. And now, a second time playing against Janice on Into the Dark again, she was going to be very aware of my capability for aggression in a way that she wasn't in the last game. And Janice is a smart player, and I figured she was going to adjust properly, and she did. I did adopt some new strategies in this game, specifically, and this is something I hadn't done before. I took the grenade this game, which a lot of people don't even know that Higher Tech has a grenade. It's not a fantastic weapon. It's four attacks on threes. It's obviously indirect. It's damage 3/4 with lethal 5. So it's like, and it's not blast or anything. It's just single target. So really, what it is it was a way for me to. I anticipated she was going to be moving up Felgor models onto like barricades and cover and conceal, and there was going to be certain guys that I just wouldn't be able to shoot. And so my thought was, if I give one of my immortals a grenade, that's another guy that I can launch forward early game and put chip damage onto the Felgors early and get that kind of train rolling. Because once you hurt a Felgor, like if you can bring a Felgor down to 4 wounds against higher attack, um, or as higher attack, that is so much easier because now they can't even charge you and fight you without probably getting killed in melee because your crit damage is 4. And then any injured Felgor at all is just dying to your shooting like nothing. So I took the grenade this game and ended up getting a. I don't think it killed anything on turn 2, but uh, it injured. I think it did exactly 6 damage to a Felgor, which is really helpful. And it's because of indirect, it gave me a shot that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to take. And against a team like that, you need every shot you can get. But generally speaking, though, she was a lot more careful this time around, and she didn't give me any shooting turn 1 at all. I think usually if you're playing against Felgor and you're not able to shoot them at all turn 1, you probably just lose. But I kind of had to pivot a little bit because I could tell I wasn't going to get any shots in, and I used my Chronomancer to. This is loot again. I used my Chronomancer to Chronometron himself. I stole an APL to be 4 APL. I Chronometron myself, moved 9 inches, opened a door, and looted the point that was more on her side. And there was a barricade over there that she had set up to protect herself. And I kind of put myself behind that barricade just to be safe. And that got me a 4-2 on turn 1. And I think I was able to get a 4-2 on turn 2 as well. And I wasn't killing nearly as many Felgor this time around, but weirdly enough, this game felt a lot safer and like a lot less like the last game, turn 3 and 4 in particular. I felt very scared. Like I was seeing the game kind of get away from me. But this game, I never felt like the game was getting away from me, and I think it was more of like an objective focused performance, um, and just like chipping away at models. I used the nanomine on the left hallway flank to just stop charges into the hallway for 2 turns, basically. My thought was if I could just hold that left objective for 2 turns, that means I'm going to get 2 4-2s on primary on the first 2 turns. And then on turn 3 and 4, I can just focus on going 3-3, and she shouldn't be able to come back. She ended up doing a decent job of coming back because she ended up getting a 4-2, I think, on turn 4. But the key thing was I had been denying her relentless aggression, which is a Felgor ploy, basically, and they reveal it at the end of a turn. And most Felgor players just take this every game. It's a really good tac op. But to summarize it, basically, at the end of the turn, they need to have five or more of their guys within 6 of enemy operatives and or within 6 of the opponent's drop zone. So between the nanomine and just killing guys, I actually was able to completely deny this from her the whole game. And we both knew she had it, so I was kind of like actively working against that. She had eliminate guards, which I denied from her once. She was able to get it one time on turn 3 after she got initiative, and she like exploded my plasma sight. But it's turn 4, and I noticed she has one tac op left that she hasn't revealed, and it's very obviously Robin Ransack. It's just there's no doubt. And she has one guy that she's about to get a kill with in melee, and so I just moved forward my I think it was one of my immortals. I just budge him within 3 inches of that guy so that she can't get Robin Ransack off of killing the plasma site that she was in combat with.
Right.
And that basically, I think, won me the game. I think I won by like 3 points. I think it was 16-13, but she got one tech op and I got all 6 of mine. So the tech ops were definitely the big difference here.
Mm-hmm.
That and just knowing when you have to like hit the switch basically and lean into primaries rather than turn one killing everything.
Gotcha.
And
So,
both my games against Janice, for the record, were really, really tight, really good games. So shout out to Janice. Janice
mm,
rocks.
so going into round two, um, losing the first round, I already know that I'm out of it, out of the running.
Hmm.
Um, but nevertheless, we were still trying to place as highly as we could. So I was paired up against Navis Breachers on Open. This was Octarius Open. All the boards that were open were using Octarius terrain at this tournament.
Yep.
Um, and I think I made a pretty big mistake this game by choosing to take what was it? Secure. Um, gosh, what's the? I can't remember the name of it. The security tack up where you select a terrain feature that has
She's
the heavy
ground.
keyword. Yeah, Seize Ground. So I chose to take Seize Ground, and pretty much right when I revealed it, that immediately became my opponent's focus for this game. And due to the way that the terrain was placed on this board, I wasn't really able to hide a whole lot of my models in a space that were close enough in order to like move up onto that terrain feature and properly secure it.
Hmm.
Um, Also did not really help this game that I had probably the worst dice ever in a game of Kill Team. I'm
Ooh,
talking my plasma gunner shot at the same model 3 times and failed to kill it. Like that type of bad dice.
that's rough.
Yeah. What else was it? I think I had like my melta gunner run up on somebody and fail to kill him as well. So unfortunately with like their blast like damage reduction, that was a big thing too.
Yeah.
Was not able to get that one, and I got absolutely stomped. They also have a lot of good Vec Guard killing close combat. So it's kind of just I just got mauled that game.
Hmm.
So
That is tough.
what was your round two, day two?
So my round two, day two is really interesting because I mentioned earlier that my loss in the pod finals was against Jonathan Reynolds, who is a Wormblade player, and my round two on day two is against Jonathan Reynolds. And not only am I playing him again, but I'm playing him on Secure, which I played him on last time, and on the same exact open board that I played him on last time. So he really mixed it up this time around because I was really surprised by this because he beat me running Seek and Destroy. Um, and when we rematched on the same mission, same map, after he beat me, he went Infiltration instead. Uh, and I didn't really, I was taken a bit off guard by that. And it didn't really end up working out for him. But this time around, I went out of my way to really threaten the Alpha Strike. Um, and I because he knew I was going to take recon because I had my engaged chronomancer out like in the open. Um, we had like we mapped it out, and I could basically get onto his vantage point in front of his drop zone and blast 5 of his guys if I took initiative. And so he knew I was going to take recon, and I was okay with him knowing that because it forces him to take infiltrate, which, if you know anything about Wormblade, infiltrate is useless for them. They can already all flip their orders on turn one. It's a core faction ability. So he took infiltrate so that he could stop me from being able to go first. And I just used my recon dash to dash him behind the building instead of going forward. So I was able to keep my model safe and force that play basically. Um, and he gives me initiative since I no longer have the ability to alpha. I'm not far enough up. Um, and we're playing secure, and I know on this board that the way it's set up And with the guys he has in hiding, he has his icon bear in hiding, and he takes the ploy turn one meticulous plan that lets his neophytes do free mission actions. So he can guarantee basically a 4-2 on primary on turn one. I basically can't do anything to stop that against Wormblade. Um, and so I just kind of accept it. I force him to do the thing to get a turn two. Notably, I dropped the nanomine in front of the building on the right side that has Kellermorph, mining laser, seismic cannon, and one of his basic cult agents. I think, yeah, it was just a basic cult agent. All four of those guys are behind it, and his Kellermorph can't come through the door without being out in the wide open. So he just leaves the Kellermorph behind the door, and the problem with that is from the door, the Kellermorph can't threaten my mid line objective. Well, my one of my safe objectives, quote unquote, that my death mark was on turn two, just because the mine was going to slow him down too much. So I have that side of the board like locked down. The problem is on the other side of the board, he has his locus, and it's the last activation on turn one, and he says, "You know what? I'm just going to go for a gambit and try to win initiative, and we'll see how that goes." And he basically just runs his locus all the way up the board, right in front of my Chronomancer, and I'm like, all right, let's do it, and we roll initiative, and I get it. And if he had gotten it, there was a decent chance that he was going to charge my Chronomancer with a Locus, maybe kill him in one go, and then charge, because he can charge 3 inches after killing something, do that with the Locus into my other Immortal, and then probably kill him too. Now, it wasn't a guarantee that he was going to kill my Chronomancer, because the Chronomancer had 13 wounds, and he had the Chronometron for the 5-up Feel No Pain. And his melee weapon is really good at parrying out. You get 3 attacks on 3s with lethal 5 and stun, which is great for parrying out. So I don't know for sure if he would have killed me. He definitely would have killed my Chronomancer. I just don't know if he would have been able to do it in one attack action. That's really the question. Now, that didn't matter because I won initiative, and my Despotech was right behind the door, kind of within 8 inches of where his locus was. So the nice thing about playing against Wormblade with higher tech is you take the Despotech with the Tesla Carbine, so 5 shots on 2s, damage 3/3, splash. And that guy in particular, regardless of, like, I think typically what I would do with my Immortals is take the same guns on all of them. But even if you wanted to go Gauss Blasters on your other Immortals, I would say take the Tesla Carbine on the Despo against Wormblade, because if he gets the chance to shoot a cult agent, assuming that's not in cover, he's going to kill the cult agent in one shot, pretty much. Because he goes up, he has 2 rerolls, he's got 5 shots on 2s, and he's going to get all 5 hits. Whether or not he gets crits doesn't even matter that much, because it basically says to the cult agent player, the Wormblade player, you need to roll all 3 of your 4-up saves or else you're dead. And he did not roll all 3 of his 4-up saves, and the Locust just died, which put me in a really good spot to start turn 2. I was able to start picking off operatives, but then the next key activation was his a lot of his guys back there behind that door by the nanomine still hadn't really gotten the chance to move much. They were all in blast range of each other, and I activate my Chronomancer, and I steal an APL. I Chronometron himself. Again, he moves 9 inches move, 3-inch dash, and he blasts the Kellermorph, one of the heavy gunners, I think it was the seismic cannon, and I think it was 1 or 2 other neophytes. And he kills everybody except the Kellermorph, who survives on like 3 wounds, or maybe, it's got to be 2 wounds, and he's stunned. So at this point, the game was kind of just over, and it was kind of we were just kind of walking through the rest of it for the most part. Every time my Immortal shot, they were killing something. He did use his mining laser and his grenade launcher together to get a kill here, a kill there, but it was turn 2. Both these guys, everybody he killed got back up the following turns. whether it was the next turn or turn 4, and it was kind of just like going through the motions at that point. But it was a really interesting game. It was definitely. I'm curious as to how that would have gone if he had won initiative on turn 2. Because he kills that Chronomancer, and then the Chronomancer probably comes back. So who knows, really? um, but yeah, I mean, it definitely puts him like a foot up on trading. But yeah, really good game with Jonathan there.
All right. So going into round 3 on day 2, I get paired up against Janice and her Felgor Ravagers, and we are on Into the Dark. And I don't know if you had a chance to play on this board, but it's the one where there's kind of like a central dividing wall, and you are deploying on the short edges of the board.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like 3 hallways, like 3 separate hallways, and yeah. Did you play on that one at all?
I don't think I did. I'm trying to like
Okay.
envision which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely not one that's like based off of like the TAC Ops 2022 card pack for Into the Dark like
I
board
believe he
setups.
used only. I don't think they used any of the other
Maybe it was
ones. I think
just
it
a
was all
weird one that
4
I've never played on before then. Um, but anyways, it was a very weird looking board. I knew I was going to have to like seed some ground somewhere just because of what Felgor Ravagers are. Uh, I felt like I had a very bad matchup going into this game. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there was a point in turn 2, I think, where I had frenzied like 3 or 4 operatives, and the highlight of this game probably was when my hardened took I think it was 11 points of damage from like the Felgor like whip operative.
Ooh,
The hardened has a 5-up save. The hardened
I
made
have a feel no pain.
5 up feel no pain, yes.
Well, and yeah.
The hardened made 10. I think it was 10 of the 11 feel no pains. Yeah. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, absolute stud. Um, he died next turn, and but yeah, at this point in the tournament, I was just looking to have a fun game with my friend Janice, and that's basically what we did. So it was a fun time. So Shane, talk about going into the finals up against Adrian and the Felgor Ravagers.
Yeah, so the final game, the grand finals, Adrian Martin had just defeated Leander in the other side of the top 4. And so him and I were the last 2 undefeated players. I think he had gone undefeated on day 1. Um, and I'm playing against Felgors again, and this time it's on capture. So my other 2 games against Janice were on loot and secure. Uh, that being said, it's on open board instead of into the dark. And so I will say, in a vacuum, although Felgor on capture is a terrifying thing, capture is also Hierotech's favorite. At least it was. I think like maybe after the buffs, which we can talk about later, they like secure more. But like honestly, the team doesn't have a ton of APL. They don't want to be spending their APL doing things other than like killing you, if possible. So um, Hierotech really likes capture, and Hierotech loves open board. Whereas Felgor loves capture, they don't love open board as much, especially Octarius. So we're basically setting up. I had taken the grenade again, which ends up being useful. Um, and Adrian and I basically have a very long conversation about just exactly how far my Chronomancer can go on turn 1. If I recon dash him, I can basically get him because we're on the long edge deployment, so like it's the deployment zones are a little bit closer to each other. Um, I can basically just be right in front of his deployment zone on turn 1. My Chronomancer can basically fly to any. There's 3 vantage points in, like along the center line, and then like each deployment zone had an Octarius building. So the Chronomancer could fly to any of those Octarius buildings on the midline, on the vantage points, and get shots if he wasn't in heavy cover, in that one piece of heavy cover. So he like we set up like dice to measure how like where he would have to be obscured, and he deployed 8 of his 10 guys behind that one building. Was very very conservative, and then he had like one guy on one unlight cover on the outside, another guy in light cover on the other outside. Um, and I did not Alpha Strike him, obviously. I just walked forward with the Apprentice and I dropped the nanomine down right in front of where all 8 of his guys were. And
Oh
that
my
alone
God.
just pinned his team so far back.
Yeah.
Um, and I need that because with capture against Felgor, they're going to get forward slowly. And I turn 3 and 4 have the potential to be very difficult for me. So I need to have a really good turn 1 and 2. Um, Now I'm able to go 3/3 on turn 1, but I get a lot of damage through. So my Chronomancer doesn't eventually fly into the middle vantage and blast a guy. He only gets like one guy, and I think he frenzies a goat. Um, and in hindsight, I probably should have taken the four. I wasn't taking the 4-up invuln against Falgor, obviously, because they don't have a lot of AP. But on this situation where his team was so concentrated, not having the 4-up invuln against his crack grenade and plasma pistol that came right out was kind of rough. And I think actually my Chronomancer, it did die, but it survived the plasma pistol and the crack grenade, and it died to the Tox bomb,
Oh my
getting a 5-up
goodness.
and doing 3 mortal wounds to him. Um, and we also determined that on one of the side objectives, his goat could get there, but I would be able to comms buff one of my immortals to um, move dash and shoot him on that objective. And I believe I did that, and I frenzied a guy there, and he had his mangler run out into light cover, and I deep striked my death mark onto a vantage point that could see the light cover. And then when I got Overwatch at the end of the turn, I frenzied the mangler because I'm 4 shots on threes basically. Um, with an auto crit with a phase ocular, I think. And so we frenzied like 3 Felgors on turn 1, and I used the grenade guy as well to run forward and chomp like 7, maybe like 7 or 8 damage onto another Felgor, who we ended up healing with the shaman, so it didn't end up being super important, but it wasted some action economy on his end. And so I start with and I use my Death Attack to just clog the other side of the door on on the middle Octarius building so that he couldn't charge through it. So he has to charge around the building, and he's in the nanomine. So almost all of his charges were just shut off because of that. Um, and the guys that were closest that he would be charging with were either frenzied, or it was like the guy that I threw a grenade at. So everybody's hurt. It's not a super ideal situation for him. But he does keep hitting my Apprentice with the Tox Bomb throughout the game and stunning him. So my Apprentice is just standing there dropping the nanomine over and over again and not doing anything else because he's only 2 APL.
Yeah.
Um, my Chronomancer does end up getting a blast onto a couple of guys, I think on turn 3, and frenzies a couple. And this is actually the only game all tournament where I never failed reanimation. I think I only did it like 2 or maybe 3 times. 2, I think. But whenever I reanimated, my guys got back up. And this was really important on the last turn because on turn 3, I had my reanimator fly 9 inches and steal a back point from him at the end of the turn. And he ended up going back there to try and get that guy again and get that point and kill that plastocyte. And then one of my guys gets up, and I have him dash onto one of the side points that he wasn't on anymore to break his capture. And then I had him move onto another point with a second action to give me another point. So it was like a 3-point swing, basically, just doing that. I basically just kept killing things, and the game was really close, but I was able to get 2 points on Seized Ground, 2 points on Unyielding Ancients, and 2 points on Escort Operative, and just get 6 points at the end of turn 4 and jump ahead, I think, and win probably by like 3 points in a game that I was behind on points. And yeah, I mean, I kind of came away from it just saying or thinking that Felgor has a really bad matchup into higher attack, and I think that my analysis of the meta felt pretty accurate. And I think actually post buffs, I think it's way worse for Felgor because the one saving grace they had was all my opponents playing Felgor would take 7 war paints and a crack grenade, so that 7, or I guess 8 of their 10 guys, because the Toxborn already can't get stunned, but 8 out of their 10 guys now can't be stunned by my Ion Stave. And if they could get stunned, that would be horrible because they're just melee. Then they're 1 APL, they just charge and do nothing. But now that they've nerfed Warpaint, they're only going to take it on like 3 guys maximum, really, unless they give up a crack. So the Ion Stave and stun in general is just way better into Felgors than it was before.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, that was the finals. So
Yeah. That was the finals. GG.
it was, yeah, it was really fun. It was Adrian was a very good player.
Mhm.
I hadn't gotten the chance to play him before, but very, very well played on his part.
He finished #1 in ITC last year, I think, right?
Oh,
Or
no,
was
you're
it
thinking
number
of the
2?
other, that's the other Adrian.
Oh, my mistake.
There's multiple Adrians on the East
Yes.
Coast. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, so that was Adepticon. It was an awesome time. It was great coming out and seeing everybody being recognized by so many people. We heard so many good things from all you guys. Next year, if we do wind up going, or whatever the next like major tournament I wind up attending is going to be, I'm going to try and bring some more command point objective markers from Objective Control along with me, because I ran out after my first 2 games. 2 sets. 2 sets of 6 objective markers. They're sweet. Go check them out. They're local to Rochester. So
Yeah.
I'll put a link down in the description below. But so do we want to go ahead? I had already put out a video, if you guys haven't watched it already, talking about the latest balanced data slate. But Shane, we have not heard from you about where you think Hyrotech sits now after the balanced data slate. You just took them to Adepticon. Obviously, you just won Adepticon with them, and now it's like the mine's getting nerfed, but it looks like everything else is getting buffed. How do you
Yeah.
feel about Hyrotech now?
So I think for the health of the game, it's a really good change. The mine was obviously really toxic,
Do you think it was
and
like the
it's
most toxic thing in the game at that point?
um I don't know about
Or
that.
do you think
It
just
was
like Vetguard
definitely,
as a team?
I don't know. I Just a scratch is pretty toxic. Well, it maybe not as much anymore, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just rather than ranking it, I think every team that's really good probably has like one toxic thing.
Okay.
And for higher tech, it was the nanomine. Um, but like you said, they nerfed the nanomine. And if I'm being honest, like in a vacuum, if you ignore the other changes, going into it, I would say that they almost like over nerfed it. And this is maybe a hot take for people. Um, but like I thought they were going to either make it 3 inches but keep it the same otherwise, or keep it 6 inches and make it not affect dashes. What they did was they made it 3 inches and it doesn't affect dashes now. So like Nanomine, it's still like a useful tech piece, but it's way, way worse than it was before. Just like so much worse, which is good because it was too good before. Um, it is a lot harder to use now, and it's more of like because it's such smaller of an area, and you can't hit quite as far with it on turn 1. I almost think you use it like end of turn 1 instead of top of turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you're doing it to like stop an objective on the midboard from getting hit by your opponent, but like you almost want to set it up later to deny charges now. It's more useful for denying charges because if you're talking about denying charges, it basically works the same way. It's just smaller. Um, but like if you place it too far behind the guy, then they can just dash out of it and not be affected at all. So you have to make sure you're placing it in a spot where they can't just dash out of it and get where they want to go. Like they have to move through it a little bit. So you're at least knocking some movement off. It's more like you're hitting a choke point rather than hitting like 12 inches of the board,
Yeah.
which good. It was definitely too good. But the fact that they did a bunch of internal balancing, I'm okay with the fact that they over nerfed Nanomine a little bit
Yeah.
because if they had just nerfed Hyrotech and hit Nanomine that hard, the team would probably be really, really bad. Um, and there's a lot of it's early days, and there's a lot of like really hot opinions out there about whether Nanomine is or not Nanomine, Hyrotech is I've been hearing people say they're S tier. They're the best team in the game now after the data slate. Um, Maybe they're S tier. I don't know. I think that a lot of the top teams got nerfed around them, and it is
Yeah.
debatable whether or not Higher Tech got buffed or nerfed after you weigh everything. But I do want to say regarding the Cryptex, um, I think I've tested the Technomancer now, and I feel bad saying this because I was talking about how I think the Technomancer has a lot of potential, and then they buffed it, and I tried it, and unfortunately, I still think the Technomancer is worse than the Chronomancer, like 99% of the time still, even with nerfed Nanomine and buffed Technomancer. Because his reanimation always goes off. Well, his reanimation can go off without having to cast an ability beforehand. Now it's like a passive aura. The problem with this is you already have two sources of reanimation on the board, and you don't want to reanimate with your Technomancer ever because it costs him an APL to do it, and that feels terrible to do.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, like like you can leech power to go back to 3 APL, but that feels awful. Like you don't want to use leech power to get to 3 APL to just get back to normal. You want to use leech power to get a 4 APL like mega activation. Um, and honestly, like you take it ideally because the Technomancer has the best gun into like elites maybe, but his gun is like not that much better into elites than say the Chronomancers and Tropic Lance. It's better, but it's not so much better that I would give up Chronometron. They also have the heal, but the heal doesn't really matter when all of you have the other spell where like your whole team is not injured, and you're like you're healing more on living metal. So the heal isn't super important. You don't actually end up reanimating with the Technomancer that often because you don't want to sacrifice the APL. Um, you shouldn't be losing enough things anyway, where like you're reanimating 3 times a turn. I get the idea where like you have another bubble to do it, but I don't know. I think with good placement of the plasma site reanimator, you're probably fine. Um, but the Psychomancer is still pretty much just bad. I will say, like, the Technomancer led Higher Tech Circle is probably like a perfectly fine, like, B tier team. It's like totally fair. There's not any like gotchas or crazy toxic stuff. It's decent. It hits hard. Um, but it's just not like crazy. The Psychomancer is just kind of bad still. Not enough. It needs to like. The Psychomancer is kind of like a worse version of the Chronomancer in a lot of ways. His powers are good, but not great. His weapon is horrible. That weapon is, unless you're like blasting 3 guys on Into the Dark, that weapon is really, really bad. Um, so I think you just never take the Psychomancer realistically if you're trying to optimize. And I think the sad thing is you probably still take the Chronomancer every game. Um, the big differences really are that you're reanimating at a 2 up now, which I think if you just play the I think if I just play the same way I did at Adepticon, it's great. Um, I'm just reanimating more often. I'm not worried about failing on the following turn. I was already playing assuming I'm going to fail on the third turn, or at least on one of my guys, so it's not the biggest deal. But the big one really is the Apprentice being 3 APL. The Apprentice being 3 APL is like, it's like having another operative. It
It's
feels so
huge.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now he can move and tap a point and like cast a power. Or he can Chronometron himself and move dash 12 inches and like steal, he can be an escort operative now, or he's going to shoot way more often than he was before. Um, so like I don't know, it's really really interesting. It does feel like you have another operative, I will say. And the fact that he's able to do that more often means he's also setting up a magnification conduit more often, where him and the Chronomancer can shoot like measuring through each other, which is fantastic. Um, it's not something you normally get to utilize that often because a lot of the time your Apprentech is just sitting there pivoting the nanomine, not actually like participating in like the battle that is going on the board.
Right.
But now he can do that and move and shoot something. Um, so like I think that it makes your team's attrition a lot better. Um, so yeah, I mean, I need to do more testing with higher tech circle. My hunch, it's really hard to say that they're better than they were. The nanomine was so big, but in some ways they are better. So I don't know. Um, it's nice that all their scariest matchups got nerfed seemingly, other than like Pathfinders. So that's nice, but requires more testing, I think.
Okay. Have you gotten the chance to play to bring him to the table after Adepticon yet?
Just once, and I played the Technomancer to try him out.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I won, but it just felt bad. I not having the Chronometron just felt horrible.
Okay.
Just I'm
All
like, what
right.
do I do without the Chronometron? I can't because like having the ability to like have that really fast move that hits the midboard and just blows something up is so good. Plus the feel no pain. Um, plus the fact that like the Chronomancer can at any point pay a CP basically to move dash 12 inches and shoot. The Techno cannot do that. Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's definitely still Chronomancer season. I just don't know if the team overall is better or worse. It's close.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're both in agreement when it comes to at least whether one team in particular got better or worse, and that is the
Vanguard.
Vet Guard.
They got
So,
worse.
honestly, long time coming. You know,
Yeah.
I'm happy with these changes. Uh, the change to the spotter, the change to the demo operative. You can only place down the demo mine once.
Hmm.
Spotter now only works against operatives in light cover, I believe. Does no
Yeah.
longer work against heavy. That's huge. I think for I don't even I don't I don't even know if I like the operative anymore. I feel
The
like
spotter.
yeah, because it's like
What do you
maybe
replace them with?
that's exactly the thing though, right? It's like,
So
well, maybe
I
you
actually
take
have,
the medic and the hardened now.
yeah, I have thoughts about this because I do have some problems with the vet guard stuff because, you know, first of all, thank God for these nerfs
Oh
because
my
now
god,
vet guard
yes.
they have to play
They have to
by the
play kill
normal
team. Yeah.
rules. Yeah. They don't get to be better than all the other teams for no reason. So, um, my problem is like, and this is like nitpicky because I think it was a great data slate. Is like you look at what they did with Hyrotech and like with Warp Coven a little bit, where they like nerfed some of the toxic stuff, but then they buffed some of the bad stuff. I would have loved to see that with Vetguard, where they make
Hmm.
the Bruiser better or something like, or some of these really useless guys on the team, like the Zealot, and just make those models a little better, and then like tone down the really unnecessary stuff. I think that would have been cool to see, especially since there was a precedent this data slate of internal balancing, which I
Hmm.
think is a really optimistic sign.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, Vetguard's still great. They're probably still A tier. They're just playing by the normal rules of Kill Team now.
Yeah. I don't know about A tier. I mean, they have the numbers still, you know.
Yeah.
So just having like 14 operatives on the field is still a very big deal, and you can still do those opening maneuvers where you can almost like guarantee a 4-2 on primary in your favor, which
Yeah.
naturally flows into your faction tac up 2 scoring.
They still have
Um,
In-Death Atonement.
yep, that's right.
Uh,
They still have that.
the demo is still good. It's just not like it's not game breaking.
Yeah.
Like,
And I mean, like the
uh,
change so that you can only place the demo mine down once a game. Like, I think if ever, if I ever laid down the mine during a game, it was like once,
yeah.
at least during my Adepticon run. So,
I will say when I played Leander at
hmm
Worlds, he placed the mine at the end of turn one and then won initiative and placed it again and blew up a guy. So I am happy about that
yeah,
change. Most people I've seen have said the same thing as you, where they're like, "Oh, I never see it happen twice," but it does
yeah.
happen.
Leander, like we've established, has a lot more experience with that team than I do. So,
Yeah, but
but
yeah, I mean, overall, yeah, the data slate's great. I love it.
mhm. All right. So we are almost wrapping up here at 2 hours almost on this podcast.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have listened this far, watched this far on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Shane and I really appreciate it. We are super pumped for Kill Team as a game right now. Um, Obviously, we're both super stoked that, I made top 8 and Shane won. So just thank you guys for tuning in, continuing to support us, supporting us through Patreon, talking in the Discord, getting games in on the Discord. We have the largest Kill Team dedicated Discord in the world right now, which is amazing. Um, Loads of stuff coming out soon. On Saturday, we're gonna have 2 videos coming out. No
Very
idea what
exciting videos.
no idea what those could be, but
Ooh.
definitely make sure to tune in Saturday morning to Command Point. We'll have some more content for you guys then. But yeah, thank you folks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon.